Hello my lovelies and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. This is my brand new series called Glam, Guilt and Cold Cases, where we get glam together while we unravel some of history's most dramatic and disturbing stories. Today's story is one of scandal, suspicion and arsenic-led heartbreak. We are talking about Florence Maybrick, an American socialite who was accused of poisoning her husband in a trial that rocked Victorian England. Florence Elizabeth Chandler was born in 1862 in Alabama to a banker and a socially ambitious mother. Raised partly in Paris, she was known for being well educated, poised and gorgeous. In 1880, at just 18, this is when she met James Maybrick, a 42-year-old cotton broker from Liverpool, and they actually met on a transatlantic voyage. They married the next year and settled into Battle Crease House, a Victorian home with all the trimmings, but despite the glam, their marriage was a mess. James was smart and respected in business, but deeply insecure. He was very obsessed with his health, to the point where he was taking arsenic, and he took arsenic daily because he believed it helped his digestion and manhood. But James was a serial cheater and had multiple mistresses. One of his mistresses actually lived in London and she had 5 of his children. He supported her financially, and also it was said that he had a mistress local to him in Liverpool. So Florence actually knew about this and she felt absolutely humiliated and emotionally abandoned in her own home. So Florence started her own affair. And can you blame the poor woman? Not really. Now, Florence and James actually had 5 children of their own together, but 2 of them tragically died in infancy. So you can imagine that the grief and the betrayal left little old Florence actually feeling quite emotionally isolated. So by 1888, Florence had started her own affair with Alfred Burnley, a charming, wealthy cotton broker around her age, which was a bit different than the 24-year age gap between her and her husband. May I just add in there, 24? Now, this relationship was not a secret fling. They were actually seen at the races together, they were seen out in public together, and people had even seen them alone together. Everybody knew. The servants knew, but most importantly, our man James knew. And he wasn't best pleased, put it that way. So Florence and James started writing love letters to each other, and one of these love letters that Florence wrote, I quote, "My darling boy, I long for the day we can be free together." This woman was just in love and really wanted to be with Alfred, and unfortunately couldn't be with Alfred because she was married. In 1889, James actually attended the Grand National, and this is where it was reportedly said he got a chill which made him violently ill. He was violently throwing up at home. Then his symptoms started to worsen and it was like stomach pain, exhaustion, that sort of thing. Now, doctors treated him for gastroenteritis, I think that's how you say it, but nothing changed. Now, Florence actually did help care for her husband, but certain servants like Alice Yap said that during this time she was actually really distant, quite vain, and was more interested in writing love letters to her lover. On May the 9th, Florence actually wrote a letter to Alfred, which said, "He is sick unto death. I did not think he would take so suddenly. I long to be free." Then 2 days later, on the 11th of May, James died. Poor old James. Now, at first, James's death was blamed on his own health issues. Yeah, maybe the fact that you were taking arsenic every day. But the only person that actually didn't believe this was James's brother, Michael Maybrick, who was actually a composer. He was a little bit suspicious of the death and was like, I don't think it's because he's been taking all this arsenic. I think something's actually like gone on and happened. And then this is when they started to investigate Florence. Now, James's brother knew about the affair and he'd actually read the letters that Florence had sent or was planning to send, because obviously if he'd read them, I presume that Alfred never received them. And this is when he was like, no, she's behind it. So he actually got servants to search her room, and this is what they found. A bottle labelled poison, a solution of meat juices and arsenic, fly papers soaking to extract the arsenic from them, and arsenic in her face powder and teeth cleaning solution. Now you might be thinking, what the hell, but that was actually quite normal for beauty products back then to have arsenic in them. It was used to brighten the skin for hair treatments and to actually freshen up the breath. Now obviously we wouldn't use this in this day and age, but back then, like I said, it was very, very common. Still, in the Victorians' press's eyes, it was still enough to charge her with arsenic poisoning. Now, do we really think the man that took arsenic daily, his wife killed him of arsenic poisoning? Poor old Florence was then arrested, and then the scandal was immediate. Now, when I tell you this was a very, very big case back in the Victorian days, the stuff I read about this, I tried to watch some videos on it actually, but there wasn't a lot, so here I have produced one. But the articles and things I was reading, it was crazy. But anyway, keep watching and you will find out what happened. So the trial began in August in 1889. Let me tell you, that courtroom was packed. It was full to the brim. Like I said, a very, very big Victorian scandal. The press were absolutely buzzing, and everything about Florence was judged, from the outfit she wore to her facial expressions. Now, this is something a lot of people forgot, that actually Florence wasn't allowed to testify as her own defence, as women back in them days were not allowed to testify. And also, women were not allowed to serve on the jury. So Florence is in court with a all-male jury. You can kind of see where this is going, can't you? So obviously, as you can tell, the jury were actually allowed to decide Florence's fate without listening to her side of the story. The prosecution focused almost entirely on her affair, the fact that there was poison found in her bedroom, and the testimonies from servants like Alice Yap. The defence then actually argued that James was a chronic arsenic user, that the levels in his system were not lethal, that there was no clear proof that Florence had actually administered this poison, and that the servants were biased because it was actually said in quite a few articles that none of them really liked Florence. So obviously they're going to be like, she killed him. But Judge Stephen delivered a harsh and moralising lecture. Florence was not just judged for murder, she was judged for being a woman who did not behave properly. After just over an hour, the jury returned a verdict. Guilty. Florence Maybrick was sentenced to death by hanging. But the public backlash was instant. They don't want to see our girl Florence going and being hung, do they? No. Editorials questioned the lack of evidence. Women's groups protested. People wrote letters demanding clemency. And get this, Queen Victoria, the Queen of England at the time, expressed concern. So 2 weeks later, Florence's death by hanging was changed, and she was actually just sentenced to life in prison. Florence was transferred to Woking Prison, where she served 9 months in solitary confinement, followed by hard labour at Aylesbury. She was forbidden from writing, she barely spoke to anyone, she was mentally broken down over time. In her 1905 memoir, Florence wrote, I've just got this up for reference so I get it right. In her 1905 memoir, My 15 Years Lost, she wrote, I was stripped of all that made life bearable. My children, my name, my voice. The silence was worse than any prison bar. Poor Florence, as you can imagine how she's feeling right now. Florence was finally released from prison in 1904 after serving 15 years, and she actually returned back to the United States. But her children, who were raised by the Maybrick family at this time, didn't want anything to do with her. Basically, they refused to speak to her, refused to see her, and refused to have any sort of contact with her. It was never actually mentioned anywhere if Florence and Alfred ever stayed in sort of communication or anything. I'm gonna take it that they didn't, and that he just maybe remarried. He decided to get married to somebody else or something like that. There was not really a lot said on that part. After her release, Florence lived quietly in New York and then later on moved to Connecticut. This was all under her maiden name, and she actually went on to give lectures to women about prison and recounted her ordeal to these women's groups. Historians and legal experts now actually consider Florence's case as a miscarriage of justice. The evidence was circumstantial and the science behind it was flawed. People were more interested in getting her done for adultery than they were murder. Some people actually believe that her sentence influenced reforms such as creation of the Criminal Court Appeal 1907. A BBC legal review series even reviewed the original verdict unsafe. Florence wasn't just convicted because they thought she poisoned James. She was convicted because she was beautiful, independent and deficient. In Victorian England, she was practically a crime. She had an affair and suddenly she's Jack the Ripper's wife. Please. Poison bottles don't equal murder when your husband is literally taking arsenic like it's vitamins. She lost her babies, she lost her freedom, she lost her children, and she came out swinging. That's survival. So, what do you think? Was Florence guilty? Was it all just an arsenic-soaked coincidence? Or was she just a woman crushed by society's double standards? But sadly, Florence died in 1941, alone and impoverished, still shadowed by scandal and still estranged from her children. Poor Florence, you did not deserve this. Thank you for watching this week's episode of Glam, Guilt and Cold Cases. If you loved this video, do not forget to give it a like and hit that subscribe button so you do not miss another one of our Glam, Guilt and Cold Cases. Next time we'll be back with another messy, mysterious and possible murderous moment from history. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and I will see you next time. Bye!